Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science, where your pillow is the observatory, your blanket is mission control, and somehow your brain still thinks it can handle existential questions after 10 p.m. tonight. We're not just talking about Earth as a planet. You've heard all of that before, right? Oceans, continents, the occasional squirrel staring into the void. No, tonight you step onto Earth like it isn't home at all, but rather the strangest laboratory ever disguised as a ball of rock and water. Picture yourself arriving here as though you've been dropped into an experiment without being asked. Every breeze feels staged, every star suspiciously positioned, and that stubborn itch on your ankle. Maybe the lab assistant is poking you with a metaphorical stick just to see what you'll do. And here's your cheeky reality check. If this is truly an experiment, you probably won't survive the final write-up. But hey, that's not tonight's problem. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time in the comments. It's fun to see where this sleepy expedition stretches across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across a wide plain, the grass under your feet damp with a dew that seems suspiciously overdesigned, each droplet refracting light like a glass bead carefully placed. The sky above hangs with clouds that look less like chance and more like brushstrokes on a vast canvas. If Earth is a test field, then someone, or something, has gone all in on the details. Consider how the oxygen balance, the tilt of the axis, and the convenient placement of a moon all line up just so. Historians still argue whether our ancestors recognized this delicate balance, or if they simply stumbled around with fire and pointy sticks, oblivious to the grand setup. A mainstream historical fact floats in. Aristotle once mused that Earth might be unique in the universe, a central stage for cosmic drama. He didn't call it a test field, but he might as well have, since his idea planted the seeds of geocentrism, the notion that everything revolves around us. And doesn't that sound like the ego of a lab rat who assumes the cheese exists only for him? Meanwhile, a quirkier tidbit. In the 17th century, a few scientists actually suggested comets were divine tools, sweeping across the heavens not to threaten us, but to clean the atmosphere. Imagine a celestial janitor sent to dust the test chamber so we don't choke on our own fumes. As you walk, you notice how everything around you feels calibrated. The chirp of a cricket synchronizes with the rustle of leaves like sound tests in a studio. Your body shifts easily into a rhythm, your lungs filling, your pulse steadying, and you begin to suspect that the control conditions here are set to lull you into compliance. Even the annoyances, mosquito bites, sudden rain showers, might be stimulus checks, little variables toggled to see how you adapt. It's not paranoia if the experiment is real, right? Or maybe that's exactly what the experiment wants you to think. You imagine a team of unseen observers taking notes. Maybe they write, subject displays curiosity at cloud formation. Response, moderate awe. Side effect, one bad joke about Aristotle. The thought is almost comforting, as if your life, chaotic as it seems, fits into a larger pattern you can't quite grasp. And isn't that the itch that drives human history? The suspicion that meaning lurks behind the curtain. When ancient priests tracked eclipses with painstaking precision, they weren't just counting shadows. They were desperate to decode the lab settings. You pause by a tree whose bark curls outward like the peeling of paint. The texture invites your fingers, rough yet familiar, and in that touch you sense a strange duality. Is this tree an independent being, or just part of the scenery built for you? Philosophers still whisper across time about this. Is the world out there real on its own terms, or is it constructed solely for your observation? The fringe tidbit that drifts into your mind. Some medieval mystics claimed Earth was essentially a classroom for souls, each rock and river positioned as a teaching aid. They didn't talk about test fields or scientific design, but the flavor is hauntingly similar. Walking onward, you stumble slightly over a stone. Not a big dramatic trip, just a gentle reminder that gravity doesn't care about your dignity. You chuckle, realizing that even in a supposed test field, the rules aren't always bent for comfort. Maybe clumsiness is part of the data set. After all, what good is an experiment if the subject never falls down? And just like that, you wonder if even embarrassment is cataloged somewhere, filed under human coping mechanisms. Humor edition. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of earth and grass, and for a fleeting moment you imagine it as breath, like the planet itself sighing in response to your musings. If Earth is a test field, then perhaps you're not just a subject, but also a collaborator, feeding back emotions, laughter, even boredom into the grand circuitry. The experiment isn't about pass or fail, but about observing what emerges when curiosity collides with circumstance. The night settles around you, stars peeking through, and you're struck by how perfect their twinkle seems. Too perfect, maybe, like little LED indicators on a cosmic control panel. You smile sleepily at the thought, because whether it's a random universe or a carefully curated field test, your role remains the same: to notice, to wonder, and occasionally to trip over a rock in the dark. You keep moving forward, and the landscape shifts until you're looking down on the whole planet in your mind's eye. It floats there like a glass orb, and the more you stare, the more it resembles a carefully engineered ecosystem rather than a lucky accident. The oceans spread like a nutrient bath, the continents like petri dish islands, each teeming with different cultures, climates, and experiments waiting to play out. The more you think about it, the more Earth feels less like a random rock and more like a blueprint for testing life itself. You lean into the sensory details: humid jungles buzzing with insects, deserts shimmering with heat, tundras stretching with silence, and you can't help but notice how well distributed these test environments are. Hot zones to push endurance, ice sheets to test survival, temperate valleys for growth and rest. Even the mountain ranges seem like boundaries etched by a cosmic hand, as though the designer wanted to separate experimental groups. Group A: high-altitude llamas. Group B: sea-level humans constantly complaining about humidity. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Charles Darwin sailed to the Galapagos Islands in 1835, and his observations of finches hopping between different habitats gave rise to the theory of natural selection. That trip wasn't intended as a lab visit, but it ended up shaping how we see Earth's ecosystems, as if the planet is running countless trials simultaneously, tweaking beak shapes here, feather patterns there. And a quirky tidbit: in medieval Europe, some scholars thought barnacle geese actually grew out of driftwood or sea foam, like odd little lab artifacts sprouting without explanation. You can imagine an amused researcher jotting down: Subject A insists birds grow from logs. Test perception: successful. The deeper you drift, the clearer the planetary balance seems. Water cycles upward into clouds, drops back as rain, seeps through soil and rises again. Photosynthesis quietly churns out oxygen while carbon dioxide sneaks back in. It's like watching feedback loops in an elegant experiment, endlessly self-correcting. Historians still argue whether ancient civilizations like the Egyptians recognized this balance or simply mythologized it through their gods of the Nile, the sky, and the sun. Did they sense the lab's parameters but translate them into stories because science wasn't yet in their vocabulary? You crouch at the edge of an imagined river, the current brushing past your fingertips. It feels alive, as if water isn't just a substance but a conveyor belt of memory, carrying whispers from one age to another. In the back of your mind, you toy with the idea that the river isn't just there. It's a boundary condition, an adjustable slider in the experiment. Too much water and a civilization drowns, too little and it collapses. Suddenly the test doesn't look so benign. And then you smirk, because even if Earth is the ultimate biosphere test, the subjects, humans, are notoriously messy data points. You think about your own life. How many times have you been handed the same challenge, only to handle it differently depending on mood, weather, or the availability of coffee? If a cosmic scientist is watching, the data must look like someone scribbling outside the margins. Maybe that's the point, to see what emerges from chaos. You tilt your head up, sensing again the atmosphere around you. Nitrogen, oxygen, argon, trace gases, a perfect cocktail for life, unless you're a sulfur-loving microbe complaining in the corner. Imagine Earth with just slightly different ratios. One tweak and you'd either suffocate or catch fire with every spark. The fine-tuning is eerie, almost too eerie. It's like someone carefully set the thermostat and then sat back to observe how long it takes before you start arguing over who controls it. The quirky fringe detail floats in here. Some New Age thinkers believe Earth emits a Schumann resonance, a natural electromagnetic frequency that supposedly syncs with human brain waves. Whether that's scientific reality or not is still debated, but the idea adds another layer of intrigue. Maybe the test field isn't only physical, it hums and pulses in frequencies that keep you tethered, like a soundtrack playing in the background of the experiment. Walking again, you cross into a meadow, and the night sky stretches above, filled with constellations mapped by long-dead astronomers. The Greeks, for instance, drew lions and hunters in the stars, turning random dots into organized figures. You can't help but laugh softly at the thought. Even when staring at raw data, humans can't resist doodling little pictures in the margins. If Earth is the lab, then constellations are just humanity's way of scribbling smiley faces on the spreadsheets. And yet, there's a calm beauty to it all. You sense that if Earth truly is a test field, it's not just sterile observation. It's artistry and rigor woven together, like a scientist who also paints. Every sunrise feels like a recalibration, every rainfall like a carefully timed stimulus. You stretch out on the grass, arms wide, accepting the strange possibility that you've never once lived outside the experiment. And the more you think about it, the more comfortable it becomes. After all, if you're a subject, you might as well be the co-author too, scribbling your own outcomes into the lab notebook with every breath. The grass fades under your feet as the world around you rearranges, and suddenly the focus isn't on the landscape anymore. It's on you, on humanity itself, the strangest collection of experimental variables you could imagine. If Earth is a test field, then people are the unpredictable compounds stirred into the mixture, bubbling away, sometimes producing brilliance, sometimes chaos, often both at once. You glance at yourself like an outside observer might, realizing you're equal parts rational thinker, emotional reactor, and compulsive snack seeker. In other words, a walking paradox, the perfect test subject. You stroll past imagined villages springing up across the globe, clay huts giving way to stone cities, cities giving way to gleaming skyscrapers, all of them teeming with people whose behaviors oscillate wildly between cooperation and conflict. The data must look baffling. One group shares food in a feast, another hoards grain until neighbors revolt. One person spends years painting frescoes on cathedral ceilings, another spends the same time inventing more efficient weapons. If you were an unseen scientist logging human responses, you'd have to write, subject group inconsistent, outcomes vary wildly, hypothesis revision required. A mainstream historical fact clicks in here. During the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries, philosophers and scientists believed humanity could progress through reason and knowledge. It was an age of optimism, almost like humans sensed they were supposed to solve something. Yet even as Voltaire wrote witty critiques and Newton decoded the laws of motion, wars still erupted, reminding you that the variables were never stable for long. Progress in one column, regression in the other, the ledger remains stubbornly balanced. Then there's the quirky tidbit. In the Middle Ages, a strange phenomenon called dancing mania swept through parts of Europe, where groups of people would suddenly start dancing in the streets for hours or even days. No one really knows why. Some think it was ergot poisoning, others mass hysteria. But if you squint at it as a test variable, it looks like the lab accidentally turned up the dial on unpredictable behavior. Imagine the cosmic researchers watching, scribbling notes. Unexpected outcome. Subjects spontaneously initiate rave. Monitor for duration. You sigh, amused at how little consistency humanity shows. And yet, perhaps that's the brilliance of the experiment. If every person behaved identically, the data would be neat but shallow. Instead, the lab gets to see love and cruelty, invention and destruction, laughter and despair, all colliding like molecules in a chaotic reaction chamber. Historians still argue whether human nature is inherently good but corrupted by systems, or inherently flawed and struggling toward improvement. The test seems designed to never give a clean answer, because the ambiguity itself is part of the experiment. You picture daily life as an endless series of micro-trials. Wake up late, variable stress activated, spill coffee on shirt, variable embarrassment toggled, encounter kindness from a stranger, observe resilience curve. Each human interaction becomes an experiment within an experiment, feeding data upward into the larger planetary matrix. And yet, instead of feeling trapped by it, you start to sense a strange comfort. You're contributing simply by existing, even if you're unaware of the results. You pass through a crowded marketplace in your imagination, voices overlapping, smells of spice and bread filling the air, children darting between legs with laughter. The sheer variety of behavior unfolding around you is overwhelming. People haggling, flirting, arguing, joking. It's all raw data streaming outward. The diversity itself feels designed, as though the experiment isn't about any one individual, but about how the whole swirling soup reacts. If Earth is a test field, then humanity is the experiment's favorite unruly variable. Impossible to predict, endlessly entertaining to monitor. Another odd little fringe thought emerges. Some 20th century psychologists suggested dreams might be humanity's subconscious test arena, a smaller simulation inside the bigger one, where bizarre scenarios play out just to see how we cope. You fight monsters, fly above cities, or show up to school without pants, not because your brain is broken, but because the experimenters are running nightly side tests. It's a strangely charming idea, like the lab is multitasking while you sleep. You chuckle softly because if that's true, then your embarrassing dream about being chased by a giant chicken wasn't meaningless. It was just data. Somewhere in the cosmic lab records, your panic over poultry is filed under human irrational fear responses. And honestly, that feels weirdly reassuring. The air cools as you continue onward, and you sense that being human is not a flaw in the experiment but its centerpiece. The unpredictability, the contradictions, the mistakes, they're the features, not the bugs. Humanity, with all its stubbornness and wonder, might be the lab's greatest variable, messy enough to surprise even the experimenters. And as you breathe in, letting the thought settle, you realize you don't need to solve the test tonight. You just need to be part of it. Another unpredictable note in the grand, ongoing experiment called Earth. You drift further into the experiment, and the world tilts toward the stories humans have always told themselves. If Earth is a test field, then maybe the oldest myths were nothing more than coded hints, bedtime tales left behind by the experimenters, so the subjects wouldn't panic too much in the dark. After all, people sitting around a fire thousands of years ago didn't talk about parameters or controls. They whispered about gods shaping clay, about serpents guarding forbidden trees, about floods washing everything away so the slate could be wiped clean. Doesn't that sound suspiciously like lab resets? You imagine yourself crouched beside one of those fires, the smell of smoke and roasting grain thick in the air. An elder speaks with a voice both trembling and commanding, telling the story of how the world began. In Mesopotamia, it was the god Marduk slaying the chaos dragon Tiamat and forming the heavens and the earth from her body. In Greece, it was Prometheus sculpting humans out of clay and sneaking them fire, basically giving lab rats the matches and seeing what happens. You can almost hear cosmic researchers saying, "Okay, subject group now has access to combustion. Observe outcomes, occasional warmth, occasional house fire." A mainstream historical fact slips in. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known works of literature, includes a massive flood narrative where the gods drown nearly all humanity, sparing only one man to rebuild. The parallels with later biblical flood stories suggest either cultural diffusion or, if you're in test field mode, an oddly consistent note from the experimenters. Sometimes the chamber gets wiped clean for a new trial. Historians still argue whether these myths emerged independently or were shared across regions, but the repetition itself feels telling. You grin at the quirkier tidbit. Ancient Egyptians believed the sky goddess Nut swallowed the sun every evening and gave birth to it each morning. It's poetic, sure, but it also sounds like someone trying to describe a daily reset cycle without access to astrophysics. Imagine living in a test field where the lights literally turned off every night, and your only explanation was that a celestial being ate them. Not exactly a peer-reviewed hypothesis, but charming nonetheless. The air around you hums with these mythic echoes. Every culture seems to have left behind fragments of lab instructions disguised as stories. The Norse spoke of Ragnarok, a destined end-of-cycle event when the world would be destroyed and remade. The Maya counted time in great cycles that looped and reset like cosmic timers. Even the Aboriginal Dreamtime stories of Australia spoke of creation and transformation as ongoing, not one and done. Everywhere you turn, myths sound like whispered reminders. This is a process, not a finished product. You wander into a temple in your imagination, cool stone walls decorated with carvings. Each etching shows a version of the world's beginnings, each line like a code you can't quite crack. Maybe the stories weren't meant to be literal at all. Maybe they were user manuals for the experiment, written in metaphor because humans weren't yet ready for technical jargon. Instead of saying variable reset, they said flood. Instead of energy input, they said fire stolen from the gods. Same concept, different packaging. The thought makes you chuckle because if the myths really were hints, humans didn't always handle them well. Instead of seeing a flood story as a metaphor for cyclical resets, some folks built giant arks, stockpiled food, and wrangled goats onto wooden decks. That's dedication or over-literalism. Either way, the cosmic researchers must have been scribbling notes furiously. Subjects interpret instructions very differently. Observe creativity. Also, goat management surprisingly efficient. And then there's the open debate. Were myths pure invention born of fear and imagination? Or did they encode real memories of events like floods, eclipses, and meteors? Historians still argue whether myths are metaphors, corrupted records, or genuine signals from something beyond. If Earth is a test field, then maybe they're all three at once, storytelling as a diagnostic tool, showing how subjects interpret unexplained phenomena under stress. You pause to think about your own bedtime stories as a child. Fairy tales of witches in forests, giants, enchanted sleep. Were those just entertainment or subtle training exercises for your imagination? Perhaps the myths of today are Marvel movies and sci-fi blockbusters, modern coded hints designed to stretch your brain into test-worthy shapes. The only difference is the packaging. Fewer clay tablets, more CGI. The firelight fades and you stand again in the open night, stars glaring above you like a million tiny eyes. Myths may never reveal their true origin, but they serve their purpose. They kept humans wondering, searching, filling gaps with creativity. And maybe that's the whole point. If you can't see the lab's walls, you'll paint them with stories. You'll make dragons, gods, and cosmic clocks, because silence is too heavy and mystery too vast. And so the myths endure, coded hints left to remind you that even in a test field, imagination is one of the experiment's sharpest tools. The firelight of myths flickers out, and now you're left wandering through the corridors of time, noticing how Earth seems to run on loops rather than straight lines. Civilizations rise like ambitious projects, flourish for a while, then crumble as if their trial phase ended. The pattern feels almost scripted, like someone upstairs is running the same test over and over with slight modifications. Change the language here, add some metallurgy there. See how long the group lasts before the data set collapses. You stroll through an imagined ruin, its stone walls half buried under vines, the faint scent of moss clinging to the air. You can almost hear echoes of laughter, hammers striking anvils, the rhythm of markets, all silenced, archived, and replaced by the next cycle. Why does history repeat? Historians still argue whether civilizations collapse because of internal corruption, climate shifts, or sheer bad luck. But in the test field hypothesis, the answer is simpler. Resets are intentional, necessary to observe how humans handle pressure and scarcity. A mainstream historical fact anchors you. The Roman Empire, mighty and sprawling, fell in the 5th century CE, leaving Europe fractured into smaller kingdoms. Textbooks often cite overexpansion, invasions, and political corruption as culprits. But doesn't it look suspiciously like a planned stress test? Let's remove centralized authority, the experimenters might have said, and watch how subjects reorganize themselves. Spoiler alert, they invented feudalism, which is basically social networking without Wi-Fi. A quirkier tidbit sneaks in. In the early 20th century, a Russian scientist named Lev Gumilev proposed a controversial theory that civilizations have a kind of life cycle of about 1,500 years, like biological organisms that grow, peak, and die. Mainstream scholars don't buy it wholesale, but if Earth is a test field, Gumilev accidentally stumbled onto the script. Civilizations are test runs with built-in expiration dates. Imagine cosmic lab notes. Subject group lifespan consistent with hypothesis. Next trial begins in 2124. Don't forget to reset snack machine. You keep walking and notice how strangely predictable humanity's cycles feel. Golden ages full of prosperity and art give way to darker times of collapse, only to be followed by a fresh burst of creativity. Renaissance after Middle Ages, Enlightenment after religious strife. It's like a pendulum swinging, testing resilience again and again. The pattern never quite breaks, though each new swing brings slightly different data, new inventions, new philosophies, new flavors of pizza. And then comes the big question, why the repetition? If the point was just survival, one successful civilization would have been enough. But the experiment keeps rebooting. Maybe the cycle itself is the test, seeing whether humans will eventually notice the pattern, grow wise to it, and prepare differently. Spoiler alert again. So far, humans keep falling into the same traps: overconfidence, inequality, endless Twitter arguments. But hey, maybe that's the fun part for the observers. You picture yourself in a time machine, drifting over Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, Egypt, Rome, the Mayan jungles, each civilization shimmering briefly like a candle before snuffing out. The cycle repeats so often it feels almost musical, a rhythm Earth can't stop tapping out. Maybe the planet itself is the metronome, pushing humanity forward then pulling back, like tides shaping the shore. Another fringe tidbit pops in. Some esoteric thinkers in the 19th century believed history ran on great cosmic cycles, influenced by planetary alignments. They saw golden ages and dark ages as inevitable turns of a celestial wheel. Mainstream historians dismiss this as pseudoscience, but if you squint at Earth as a test field, it sounds plausible. External dials adjusted from outside, each alignment triggering a new phase of the experiment. You step into the remains of a toppled temple, marble columns leaning like tired giants. Around you, silence reigns where once debates and rituals filled the air. You wonder if the people who lived here felt the cycle closing in, or if they thought their empire would last forever. Probably the latter. Humans are notorious for thinking this time it's different. If Earth is a lab, then maybe hubris is the most consistent data point of all. Yet even as civilizations fall, you can't help but notice the resilience that carries forward. Knowledge gets smuggled through collapse, manuscripts hidden in monasteries, stories preserved orally, techniques rediscovered centuries later. It's almost like the experiment has a built-in memory cache, ensuring each new trial doesn't start completely from scratch. Sure, the Romans fell, but aqueduct technology survived. The Maya cities emptied, but their astronomical wisdom lingered. Reset doesn't mean erase, it means adjust. As the night deepens, you sense the rhythm of rise and fall echoing in your own heartbeat. Each thump a cycle, each breath an iteration. Maybe you too are part of the repeating pattern, a smaller loop nested inside the grander one. And strangely, that thought doesn't frighten you. It feels familiar, like you've walked this path before and will again, each time offering the experiment a slightly different version of yourself. You smile, half amused, half comforted, whispering to the unseen observers, "Fine, run your cycles, we'll keep dancing." And somewhere maybe someone is jotting in a notebook. Subject shows awareness of repeating patterns. Response, humor and mild defiance. Experiment continues. The ruins dissolve into tremors beneath your feet, and suddenly the ground shudders like a restless giant rolling over in its sleep. Earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, plagues. You start to notice them not as random catastrophes, but as stress tests built into the design of this planetary laboratory. What better way to observe resilience than to shake the terrarium now and then, tipping the ants out of their neat little tunnels to see how fast they rebuild? You picture the planet's disasters not as accidents but as buttons on a control panel. Push seismic activity and watch humans scurry. Dial up volcanic eruption and note how civilizations adapt. Sprinkle in plague to measure cooperation versus panic. If Earth is the test field, then disasters are the pop quizzes, the unannounced exams that reveal what subjects really know when there's no time to prepare. And judging by history, humanity's grade average is somewhere between surprisingly clever and ran out of toilet paper. A mainstream historical fact anchors the thought. In 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted and buried the Roman city of Pompeii under ash. For centuries it lay frozen in time, a grim snapshot of a society caught mid-routine, bakers at ovens, dogs chained, children mid-play. Historians still argue whether Pompeii's fate was a singular tragedy or just one of many reminders that human grandeur is always provisional. But in test field mode, it feels like a classic stress trial. What happens when luxury villas and marketplaces are suddenly stripped away? Do humans learn humility or just rebuild closer to another volcano? The quirky tidbit arrives. In 1816, known as the year without a summer, volcanic ash from Mount Tambora darkened skies worldwide, leading to crop failures, strange weather, and eerie sunsets. Strangely, that same summer Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein by candlelight during a gloomy Swiss vacation. Imagine the experimenter's note: triggered climate anomaly, unexpected outcome, Gothic literature, subjects invent monster genre, noted. You can't help but laugh softly, because yes, even disasters can lead to art, creativity, reinvention. The lab doesn't just measure how humans survive physically, but also how they reinterpret chaos into meaning. Out of ashes and darkness comes story, music, innovation, proof that resilience isn't just practical, it's imaginative. As you keep walking, the air thickens with the memory of plagues. Streets emptied, bells tolling, masks shaped like birds peering into the gloom. The Black Death of the 14th century killed nearly half of Europe's population, yet the centuries after saw profound social change, from labor shifts to the eventual Renaissance. Historians still argue whether catastrophe directly sparked cultural rebirth or if the timing was coincidence. In the test field perspective, the plague looks like a devastating but intentional parameter tweak. Fewer subjects, altered conditions, observe long-term outcomes. Your imagination wanders to modern disasters: hurricanes slamming coasts, wildfires raging, pandemics grinding the world to a halt. Each one feels like a stress test scaled up for the 21st century. Do humans share resources or hoard them? Do they cooperate globally or retreat behind borders? If someone is watching, the last few years must have provided enough data to fill several cosmic hard drives. And then there's the fringe detail. Some thinkers believe Earth itself is conscious, using disasters as corrective feedback, like a body fighting infection with fever. Earthquakes and storms become the immune system of the planet, shaking off imbalances to restore health. Mainstream science doesn't support the idea of a conscious Earth, but it does add a strange layer to the test field hypothesis. What if the lab is alive and is also the experimenter? You pause, listening to the silence after an imagined quake. The dust settles, the cracks in the earth slowly cool, and people emerge, shaken but alive. It's always the same cycle: destruction, grief, rebuilding. And every time humanity adds something new: better architecture, faster communication, fresh stories to pass down. It's like watching subjects who not only endure the test but learn to preempt it, slowly leveling up. You tilt your head toward the stars, wondering if resilience is the single metric being measured. Not intelligence, not morality, not wealth, but the stubborn ability to rebuild after the walls crumble. Maybe that's what the experiment is about: discovering whether life, when knocked down again and again, keeps finding reasons to get up. And so you walk on, half amused, half awed, whispering, "Fine, shake the snow globe again. We'll still dance inside it." Somewhere in some cosmic notebook, maybe that line gets written down as data. Subject displays humor under simulated disaster. Coping mechanism confirmed. The dust of imagined disasters drifts away, leaving you standing in a quiet clearing where time itself feels fuzzy, as though your memory has been tampered with. You sense it on a personal level. How many times have you forgotten lessons you swore you'd never repeat? Humanity seems to share that same forgetfulness, stumbling into the same traps century after century. If Earth is a test field, maybe memory isn't broken. It's being deliberately reset, like a chalkboard wiped clean between experiments. You run your hand over the bark of a tree, the grooves like lines in a half-erased notebook. Civilizations carve knowledge into stone, but stones crack. Empires record wisdom in libraries, but libraries burn. Individuals gather experiences, but memories fade with age. The cycle of remembering and forgetting seems almost engineered. Historians still argue whether societies collapse because they forget the mistakes of the past, or whether forgetting is simply the cost of moving forward. From the test field perspective, it looks suspiciously like part of the design. Each trial starts with partial memory loss, to see what fresh improvisation subjects will invent this time. You think back to one mainstream historical fact. When the Library of Alexandria burned, whether in Julius Caesar's siege, later conflicts, or several smaller incidents, no one is sure. Thousands of scrolls were lost. Records of mathematics, medicine, astronomy, even maps of lands that may or may not exist. Humanity mourns that loss like a collective amnesia event. If Earth is a test field, the destruction of Alexandria was less a tragedy and more a reset button. Subjects progressing too fast. Roll back memory. Observe adaptation. Then a quirky tidbit surfaces. Some indigenous Australian cultures pass down knowledge through songlines, long, intricate songs that act as oral maps of the land. The melody itself encodes geography, history, and spiritual meaning. Imagine the experimenters noticing. Written memory fragile. Observe oral transmission system. It's a clever workaround, proving that even when the chalkboard is erased, subjects can sing the answers back into existence. You sit in the clearing and close your eyes, tracing the hazy corridors of your own memory. Childhood blurs with adolescence. Details vanish, but certain emotional beats remain sharp. Maybe memory in this test isn't meant to be archival, it's meant to be selective. Forget the fine print, keep the moral. Forget the dates, remember the feelings. What matters is whether the story is strong enough to guide behavior the next time around. Still, the human pattern is comically repetitive. Empires rise, overextend, collapse. Economies boom, bust, and boom again. Relationships falter for the same avoidable reasons. Bad communication, questionable karaoke choices. You sigh, amused at the possibility that forgetfulness is less a bug and more a deliberate condition of the experiment. Without it, humanity might stagnate, paralyzed by too much knowledge of the past. With it, you get fresh attempts, fresh creativity, even if it means tripping over the same rock for the 100th time. Historians still argue about whether history itself teaches lessons. Some say yes, pointing to cycles of reform and progress. Others argue no, since societies keep repeating errors despite the evidence. In the test field model, the debate is irrelevant. Forgetting is engineered so that new data can emerge. Imagine the lab notes. Subject group repeatedly fails at empire sustainability. Reintroduce collapse conditions. Monitor for fresh strategies. Also, note improvement in sarcasm levels. You smile at the thought that maybe your own daily forgetfulness, where you left your keys, whether you fed the cat, what your password is, fits into the same pattern. Tiny resets keep you improvising, testing your patience and creativity. It's irritating, yes, but maybe it's also part of the cosmic questionnaire. Can subject adapt quickly when memory fails? A fringe detail drifts in. Some philosophers in the early 20th century toyed with the idea of eternal return, the notion that all events repeat infinitely. Nietzsche called it a challenge. Would you live your life exactly as it is, over and over? It's a chilling but fitting thought. If Earth is a test field, maybe every run is just a rerun, each cycle starting fresh with wiped memory, while somewhere the experimenters watch the outcomes like endless replays on a cosmic DVR. You open your eyes again, gazing at the clearing. The trees sway as though they've seen countless cycles, their roots drinking deep from soil layered with forgotten histories. The wind carries whispers you can almost understand, echoes of past lives, past civilizations, past yous. And you can't help but feel both small and strangely liberated. If memory resets are part of the experiment, then your job isn't to cling desperately to the past. It's to improvise in the present, to add one more unpredictable twist to the data. You chuckle softly, whispering to yourself, "Fine, forget me tomorrow, I'll surprise you again." And somewhere in the unseen lab, maybe a researcher scribbles. Subject displays humor when confronted with memory resets. Resilience confirmed. Experiment continues. The wind shifts again, carrying faint echoes of bells, chants, and whispered prayers. You find yourself walking through a mosaic of temples, churches, shrines, and mosques, each one buzzing with the same invisible thread: belief. If Earth is a test field, then religion might not be random superstition at all. It could be an emergent response to the strangeness of the experiment. When subjects can't see the observers, they invent gods to explain the test. You step inside a stone cathedral, cool air wrapping around you, candles flickering like stars transplanted indoors. The sound of voices rises in hymns, reverberating through arches designed to make small groups feel part of something enormous. You sense it instantly. Religion functions like a lens, a way of focusing blurry reality into a story that feels manageable. Maybe it's not about truth in the literal sense. It's about calibrating human behavior, giving structure when the lab conditions feel too chaotic. A mainstream historical fact drops in here. During the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century CE, Christianity shifted from persecuted cult to state religion of the Roman Empire. In a test field interpretation, that looks less like coincidence and more like a major variable change. Subject group now unified under shared belief system. Observe cooperation versus control. Historians still argue whether Constantine's conversion was sincere faith or political strategy. In the experiment view, sincerity doesn't matter. The response data is what counts. And the quirky tidbit: medieval Europeans believed the bones of saints carried miraculous power, leading to booming relic trade markets. Pilgrims traveled vast distances just to touch a fragment of someone's finger bone or a scrap of cloth. It sounds absurd now, but if Earth is a lab, maybe those relics acted like psychological placebos, physical tokens to stabilize subjects' morale when data stress got too high. Here, touch this bone, feel better, continue experiment. You wander further and notice how each religion maps the unseen differently, but all seem to point to the same nagging suspicion. Life has purpose beyond what's visible. The ancient Greeks offered sacrifices to keep gods appeased. Buddhists speak of cycles of rebirth, karma, and escape into nirvana. Indigenous cultures describe spirits embedded in rivers, rocks, and skis. Each is a story-shaped attempt to make sense of test conditions without seeing the lab's actual equipment. Historians still argue whether religions emerged primarily as tools of social control or as genuine attempts to grapple with mystery. In the test field model, both explanations work. Religion acts like a diagnostic. Does belief inspire cooperation, compassion, and stability, or does it splinter into conflict and crusades? Either way, the results are fascinating data. You pause by an incense burner in your imagined temple, watching smoke spiral upward. You wonder if prayer itself is part of the experiment, a human attempt to send feedback back to the observers. Maybe it's less about divine intervention and more about logging a request in the system. Dear higher power, please fix crops. Also, thanks for inventing chocolate. If anyone's monitoring, prayer might be just as much a data packet as your dreams. And then the fringe detail arrives. Some modern researchers explore whether consciousness could be a kind of shared field that religions tap into, like radio receivers tuning to different frequencies of the same broadcast. It's speculative, controversial, and hotly debated, but it does line up neatly with the test field theory. Different cultures might just be tuning into the same cosmic Wi-Fi, each describing the signal in their own language. You step outside into the night, the temple behind you glowing faintly, and you sense how religion has shaped humanity's collective journey. It builds cathedrals that stretch human engineering, writes poetry that touches eternity, sparks wars that level cities, inspires art that takes your breath away. It's messy, contradictory, beautiful, a perfect human variable. Maybe the experimenters smile every time humans light candles in the dark, whispering to unseen ears, clinging to belief when no proof is available. The air feels still now, as though listening, and you find yourself whispering too, not out of piety but curiosity. If this is a test, consider this my prayer. May we at least be entertaining data. You chuckle, the sound small under the vast sky. And maybe somewhere beyond your sight, a note is scribbled in the lab book. Subject engages in humor-laced pseudo-prayer. Emotional stability intact. Continue observation. You leave the temples behind, stepping into a landscape buzzing with wires, screens, and humming machines. Civilization seems to accelerate the further you walk, and suddenly you're surrounded by blinking devices, towers stretching into clouds and satellites drifting overhead like fireflies caught in orbit. If Earth is a test field, then technology looks suspiciously like the experiment's fast-forward button. Out of nowhere, humanity leaps from stone tools to smartphones in a blink of geological time, as if someone is tweaking the variables behind the scenes. You glance back at history's slow crawl, millennia of chipped flint and wooden plows, and then notice how, in just a few centuries, steam engines gave way to electricity, to flight, to moon landings, to pocket computers that can order tacos at 2 a.m. Historians still argue whether this acceleration was purely natural or whether certain nudges, mysterious inspirations, unexplained aha moments, pushed inventors along. In the test field hypothesis, those leaps look like external adjustments. Increase innovation slider. Observe response. Subjects invent memes. A mainstream historical fact flickers here. In 1440, Johannes Gutenberg's printing press revolutionized knowledge distribution. Suddenly, information that once trickled only through scribes and monasteries flooded across Europe. Literacy spiked, ideas spread, revolutions followed. It's often called one of the most important inventions in history, but if Earth is a test chamber, it looks like a major data infusion. Provide subjects with mass communication. Observe whether cooperation increases or infighting accelerates. Spoiler, both happened. And here's your quirky tidbit. In the early days of electricity, some Victorians believed telegraph wires could carry not just messages but ghosts. Spiritualists used telegraph metaphors to describe seances, imagining the afterlife as a cosmic switchboard. You can almost hear the experimenters chuckling. Introduce new communication tech. Subjects immediately assume connection to dead relatives. Unexpected outcome, but interesting. You stroll through this glowing cityscape, neon lights buzzing overhead, the smell of ozone mingling with exhaust. Technology seems to appear in jumps rather than steady climbs. 1 decade, clunky radios. The next, satellites bouncing signals across the globe. 1 century, horse-drawn carriages. The next, cars lining highways, then rockets scraping the sky. The acceleration is unnerving, like someone pressed skip on the slow parts of human development. Historians still argue about the Industrial Revolution. Was it inevitable once coal and steam were discovered, or did it require a strange confluence of geography, culture, and economics? In the test field frame, inevitability doesn't matter. What matters is that subjects were nudged into harnessing fossil energy, transforming society overnight. Maybe the observers wanted to see how quickly humans could scale from village fires to global factories, and whether they'd notice the smoke filling the chamber. The glow of your phone in your hand, yes, even in this dreamy stroll, your phone tags along, makes you wonder about modern nudges. Where did the sudden burst of digital innovation come from? Why did circuits shrink, code proliferate, and artificial intelligence arrive seemingly out of thin air? Fringe thinkers sometimes whisper about seed knowledge, the idea that humanity might occasionally be fed ideas from outside, disguised as inspiration. Mainstream science laughs it off, but in a test field lens, it fits. Upload new software patch to subjects. Monitor adaptation speed. Current result, endless cat videos. You pause at the hum of a server farm in your imagination, its fans blowing warm air like a mechanical desert wind. Information pulses through cables, invisible yet world-shaping. Maybe technology itself is the experiment's biggest test, handing humanity tools without instruction manuals to see how responsibly or irresponsibly they're used. Fire gave warmth and war. Nuclear fission gave electricity and bombs. The internet gave encyclopedias and conspiracy theories. Always both, always messy, always data-rich. The night air tingles as you wonder if the observers are most curious about whether humans ever stabilize their use of tools. Do you learn moderation? Or do you endlessly sprint, inventing faster and faster machines until the chamber walls themselves bend? If Earth is a test field, maybe the ultimate variable is acceleration itself. How fast can subjects run before they trip? You chuckle quietly, shaking your head. Probably faster than we should, you mutter. And maybe, somewhere in the cosmic lab, someone writes, subject recognizes acceleration, displays humor and caution, continue observation. The glow of server farms fades, and you drift into a softer, stranger territory, the unlit hallways of the human mind. If Earth is a test field, then your brain is like a mini-lab nested inside the bigger one, running experiments of its own while you sleep, meditate, or drift into altered states. Dreams especially feel suspicious, bizarre, fragmented, emotionally charged, as though someone is tweaking the settings just to see what happens. You stretch out on the grass in this imagined landscape, eyelids heavy, and almost instantly the dream state begins. In your mind, you fly without wings, talk to old friends who aren't alive anymore, and face surreal trials that melt away as soon as you wake. Scientists admit they still don't fully understand why humans dream. Historians still argue whether ancient dream interpretations were primitive psychology or coded attempts to navigate the unknown. In a test field frame, dreams look like nightly simulations, microtests running inside your head to generate extra data. A mainstream historical fact drifts in. In Mesopotamia around 2000 BCE, people recorded dreams on clay tablets, treating them as messages from the gods. Some rulers even made decisions based on dream omens. That suggests humanity has always suspected dreams were more than random noise. And a quirky tidbit. In the 19th century, French writer Gérard de Nerval famously took his pet lobster for walks on a blue ribbon leash, claiming the lobster was a better dream companion than most humans. Eccentric, absolutely. But in the test field narrative, maybe he was just experimenting with variables. Dream enhancement via crustacean companionship. Results inconclusive but stylish. You wander deeper into this dreamlike realm, where colors shift unpredictably and sounds echo strangely. Meditation, trance, and rituals across cultures all seem designed to alter consciousness. Another way humans poke at the edges of the lab. Shamans in Siberia drum themselves into other worlds. Yogis in India slow their breath until they feel their bodies dissolve. Even modern brain scanners show altered states lighting up neural circuits in peculiar patterns. If Earth is the test field, then the human mind is both subject and experimenter, endlessly curious about its own settings. Historians still argue whether altered states served primarily religious functions or practical ones, like coping with stress, trauma, or community bonding. But in this hypothesis, it doesn't matter. The key is that the experiment generates these conditions naturally, then watches how humans use them. Do you seek gods in visions, solve problems creatively, or just imagine teeth falling out for no reason? Each outcome is a data point. You laugh softly, remembering your own odd dreams, showing up to work without pants, flying over rooftops, being chased by a giant duck wearing a monocle. Ridiculous, yes. But what if each dream is less nonsense and more stress test, a rehearsal for unpredictable scenarios. Maybe the experiment doesn't care whether you defeat the duck. Maybe it just wants to see if you try. Another fringe thought sneaks in. Some neuroscientists suggest dreams help consolidate memory, while others claim they're purely evolutionary leftovers. But there are also those who toy with wilder theories, dreams as glimpses into parallel realities, or as simulations built into the brain by design. Mainstream science shakes its head, but in the test field story it fits neatly. Every night, humanity enters a mini-lab, uploads scenarios, then reports back subconsciously with emotional data. You stir from your imaginary dream and sit up in the grass. Around you, the air hums with the memory of visions. Whether divine messages, neurological maintenance, or cosmic tests, dreams are unavoidable. You don't choose to dream, you're compelled to. That alone feels like evidence. Maybe the experiment isn't just about what you do awake, but how your inner world handles chaos. And here's the cheeky thought that makes you grin. If the experimenters are watching, they've got front row seats to billions of surreal performances every night. One person dreams of climbing mountains, another of endless falling, another of giving a PowerPoint presentation to penguins. Imagine the cosmic researchers taking notes, giggling. Subject displays anxiety about aquatic bird judgment, possible link to public speaking fear. You yawn, stretching, and the boundary between waking and dreaming blurs. You realize you're both a participant and a witness, generating endless storylines each night for reasons you may never fully know. And strangely, that feels comforting. After all, if Earth is a test field, at least your dreams ensure the data is never boring. The dream haze thins, and when you open your eyes again, the world is bristling with the unexplained. You find yourself wandering through a twilight landscape littered with anomalies, lights darting across the sky, footprints with no owners, creatures glimpsed on misty lakes, and stories whispered around campfires. If Earth is a test field, then perhaps all these oddities, UFOs, cryptids, glitches, aren't accidents at all. They're little sparks tossed into the chamber to see how the subjects respond. Above you, the stars rearrange as if to mock your sense of order. Suddenly, a flash streaks across the sky, halts and zips in a direction no physics textbook condones. UFO sightings from Roswell to recent Navy videos remain unexplained. Historians still argue whether they're misidentified natural phenomena, secret military tech, or evidence of visitors. In a test field model, they're simpler, programmed anomalies, injected like curveballs in a simulation. Let's throw in unidentified lights. Observe whether subjects panic, worship, or make memes. You smile, remembering a mainstream historical fact. In 1561, citizens of Nuremberg claimed to see a massive aerial battle between strange objects in the sky: spheres, cylinders, crosses, and discs. They even printed broadsheets about it, complete with woodcut illustrations. To this day, no one knows what they really saw, but in the test field lens, it's classic mischief. Introduce anomaly, sky battle. Outcome, mass hysteria, religious interpretations, historical record preserved. Excellent data. And here's the quirky tidbit. The infamous Loch Ness Monster gained worldwide fame in 1934 from a blurry photograph that many later dismissed as a hoax. Yet people still flock to the Scottish lake, hopping for a glimpse. Whether Nessie exists or not, the belief endures. In test terms, maybe the creature itself doesn't matter. It's the human persistence, the stubborn willingness to hope for magic in murky waters, that's valuable data. You continue your walk and notice glitches closer to home. Deja vu moments where time hiccups, coincidences so precise they feel scripted, people swearing entire objects disappear and reappear. Fringe thinkers whisper that these anomalies are signs of a simulated reality, little cracks in the rendering. Mainstream science shakes its head. But if Earth is a test field, the glitches might be deliberate, checks to see if subjects notice inconsistencies. Subject double counts spoons in kitchen. Response: mild confusion, shrugs, continues experiment. The path grows darker and a shadow brushes past, a tall, unrecognizable figure slipping between trees. Your skin prickles, not in terror but curiosity. Cryptids from Bigfoot to Mothman fall into this same category. Unverified, unprovable, yet endlessly compelling. Historians still argue whether cryptid stories are misidentifications, folklore, or outright hoaxes. But if this is a test, cryptids serve a purpose, dangling mystery in front of subjects to measure imagination versus skepticism. And you have to admit it works. Even you lean forward when someone says they've seen glowing eyes in the woods. Part of you doubts, part of you thrills, and that tension itself is the point. Humans crave explanations, but they also crave wonder. The anomalies ensure that both instincts stay alive. The fringe detail sneaks in now. Some scientists have suggested that UFO and cryptid experiences might be generated internally, neurological events, misfired perceptions. But what if that's the lab's trick? If anomalies blur the line between external and internal, the experimenters get richer data. Subject perceives stimulus, unsure if external or self-generated. Fascinating confusion recorded. You chuckle, feeling oddly grateful for the strangeness. After all, if the world were too tidy, you might stop paying attention. The weird keeps you awake, keeps you curious, keeps you telling stories. And maybe that's the point. Anomalies aren't glitches. They're enrichment exercises for the lab rats. Like putting a puzzle in the cage just to see how long it takes you to gnaw through it. As you walk, the lights in the sky fade, the shadow in the forest vanishes, and the lake lies calm and unbroken. You'll never prove what you saw or didn't see. But your heartbeat is a little quicker, your thoughts more alive. And somewhere in the cosmic notebook, a line is written. Subject exposed to anomalies. Response: wonder, humor, continued curiosity. Test successful. The lake ripples once, then stills. And as you step away from the shadows and anomalies, you feel the weight of something heavier pressing in. The persistent problem of suffering. If Earth is a test field, then suffering might not just be an unfortunate side effect. It could be the very metric being measured. Pain sharpens behavior, grief reshapes societies, struggle drives innovation. And yet, as you let that idea sink in, you can't help but smirk. If this is a test, then someone out there is grading humanity on how well we deal with stubbed toes and heartbreak. You walk along a path lined with weary figures. Some carry physical burdens, disease, hunger, exhaustion. Others lug invisible ones, loneliness, guilt, the ache of loss. You feel their presence like echoes of your own hardships, and you wonder if the experiment is less about how many survive than about how they cope. Do humans crumble under suffering, or do they transform it into something? Songs, philosophies, new beginnings. A mainstream historical fact lands here. During the Great Depression of the 1930s, unemployment and poverty crushed millions in the United States and beyond. Yet that same period birthed remarkable creativity in art, literature, and social reform. Photographers like Dorothea Lange captured haunting images of resilience, and governments experimented with safety nets. Historians still argue whether suffering spurred progress or simply forced survival. In the test field hypothesis, suffering is the lever. Dial it up, observe whether subjects innovate or despair. And the quirky tidbit. In ancient Rome, some physicians believed gladiators' blood had medicinal properties. Spectators sometimes collected it, thinking it could cure epilepsy or impart strength. If you tilt your head, it looks less like medicine and more like test subjects improvising wildly under pressure. Problem: disease. Available variable: spilled blood. Solution: attempt: drink it. Data: questionable. The path continues, and you sense suffering isn't distributed evenly. Some endure famine, others feast. Some are safe in cities, others swallowed by wars. Historians still argue whether inequality is a natural result of human society or an imposed condition of the system. From the test field view, it looks suspiciously intentional. If everyone suffered equally, the outcomes would be predictable. But uneven suffering tests empathy. Do the comfortable reach out to the struggling, or do they hoard resources until the system buckles? The silence thickens as you remember your own small sufferings, lost friendships, missed chances, those nights when sleep refused to come. Pain on a personal scale mirrors the planetary one. You wonder if each heartbreak is logged somewhere, not cruelly but curiously. Subject responds to rejection with chocolate ice cream. Emotional resilience noted. It's funny and tragic all at once, and the cosmic observers must be endlessly entertained by the range of coping mechanisms humans invent. Another fringe detail flickers in. Some philosophers suggest suffering isn't a flaw but the core of consciousness itself. Without it, joy would have no meaning. Choice would lose weight. Mainstream science doesn't quantify suffering this way, but in the test field narrative it makes sense. Pain is the data, resilience is the measurement, and joy is the rare side effect that makes the subjects keep playing. You pause by a worn bench in your imagined journey, sitting under a crooked lamp post that flickers dimly. Around you, echoes of the world's greatest laments hum, the cries of battlefields, the weeping in hospitals, the quiet sighs in lonely rooms. It should feel crushing, but somehow it doesn't. Instead, it feels woven into the fabric of existence, not as punishment but as texture. If Earth is a lab, then suffering might be the dye that makes the pattern visible. And here's the joke you can't resist. If suffering is the main data point, then stubbing your toe at 3 a.m. might be the universe's favorite control test. Yes, measure global wars and famines, but don't forget toe versus furniture leg. Classic variable. You chuckle because the absurdity itself is oddly soothing. You rise again, heavier yet calmer, realizing that suffering, however senseless it feels, may be the key to the whole experiment. Not because it makes sense, but because it forces you to respond. And your response, grief, art, laughter, rebuilding, is the real data. Somewhere in the hidden lab ledger, maybe it reads, subject confronted with suffering, response, humor and persistence, continue observation. You stand from the crooked bench, stretching the ache from your bones when a new sensation ripples through the air, a prickling awareness as though eyes are fixed on you from beyond the sky. If Earth is a test field, then surely there are supervisors, cosmic researchers, or perhaps indifferent interns jotting notes as they sip whatever beings like them sip. The idea makes you shiver, not in fear but in recognition. You've suspected it all along, haven't you? The sense that you're being watched, measured, and occasionally nudged like a chess piece on an invisible board. You picture them as you walk, maybe towering, multi-limbed entities scribbling with instruments you can't comprehend. Or maybe they're disappointingly ordinary, clipboard-wielding observers with coffee stains on their robes. Ancient people imagined gods watching from mountaintops, while modern thinkers imagine extraterrestrials behind the veil. Historians still argue whether these watchers were ever real figures or just projections of human anxiety. But in the test field lens, supervisors are inevitable. You don't run an experiment this elaborate without staff. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. In the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish text, there's mention of watchers, angels who descended to observe and interact with humans. Some traditions claim they tampered, teaching forbidden knowledge. In the test field hypothesis, that reads like researchers breaking protocol, interfering with their own subjects. A classic lab scandal. And then the quirky tidbit. In the 20th century, a man named George Adamski claimed to meet friendly space brothers from Venus in the California desert. He described them as tall, blonde, and peace-preaching. Mainstream historians consider it a hoax, but from the test field angle, it looks like a field supervisor checking in, offering a pep talk, then vanishing before anyone else can verify. You walk on and the sensation of being observed lingers. Every decision you've ever made, every kindness, every mistake, every awkward laugh feels suddenly cataloged. Not judged exactly, but noted. Perhaps the experimenters don't care about morality the way you do. Perhaps they're more interested in whether you learn. Do you repeat mistakes? Do you invent new ones? Do you keep trying anyway? Historians still argue whether humanity's sense of divine judgment stems from social needs, keeping order through invisible surveillance, or from an actual awareness of being monitored. In the test field perspective, maybe both are true. Religion is the human narrative of cosmic supervision, while the real supervisors sit just out of reach, adjusting dials, chuckling when you trip over the same metaphorical rock. You tilt your head upward, whispering, "If you're listening, I hope you're at least entertained." The stars blink back innocently like poker players hiding their tells. Maybe they're cameras, maybe they're just stars. Either way, you feel lighter for saying it out loud. And here's the funny twist. If cosmic supervisors really exist, maybe they're not as dignified as you imagine. Maybe they have office politics, budget constraints, coffee shortages. Picture an interdimensional meeting. Team A, stop adding cryptids to the North American quadrant. Team B, your volcano activity is off the charts. And whoever authorized avocado toast as a global craving, come to my office immediately. The thought makes you laugh softly, and the heaviness of suffering from earlier begins to ease. Because if you're being watched, it doesn't have to be sinister. It could be affectionate, even amused, like scientists observing an experiment they've grown oddly fond of. After all, no one spends this long running a test without caring about the subjects, at least a little. You breathe deeply, letting that idea settle, and the night around you softens. The trees sway more slowly, the stars dim to a gentle glow, and your steps feel less urgent. If supervisors are out there, maybe they don't need you to pass or fail. Maybe they just want to see how beautifully, how clumsily, how stubbornly you live inside the test. And now the narration slows like a lullaby edging you towards sleep. Your words stretch, soften, unravel into longer breaths. You picture the cosmic observers leaning back, adjusting the volume of the universe down to a whisper, letting you rest between trials. The clearing around you fades to quiet, the lamp posts dim, and the world becomes a safe, dark cocoon. You're no longer weighed by cycles, disasters, or suffering. You're just here resting, while the experiment hums on in the background. So let the supervisors watch. Let them scribble their notes and record your dreams. Tonight, you've given them enough data. Now it's your turn to close your eyes, slow your breath, and let sleep carry you gently across the test field, safe and unhurried. You drift onward, leaving behind the hushed glow of imagined supervisors, and suddenly Earth feels less like a test chamber and more like a sprawling training ground. Every mountain, river, storm, and sunrise seems positioned not to confound you, but to shape you, like obstacles in a course designed to toughen subjects without entirely breaking them. The ground crunches under your feet, a reminder that walking itself is practice. Stumble, balance, continue. If the planet is a field, maybe the experiment isn't about destruction at all. It's about resilience training. You pass through a landscape of challenges. Harsh winters that force communities to huddle and innovate. Long droughts that test cooperation. Predator eyes glowing at the forest's edge, daring early humans to invent weapons, fire, and strategy. Every trial feels like it's less about survival for its own sake, and more about learning how to adapt, to solve, to rise. Historians still argue whether human ingenuity emerged by chance or necessity. In the test field perspective, necessity wasn't chance at all, it was the syllabus. A mainstream historical fact underscores the idea. During the Ice Age, humans didn't merely endure. They developed clothing, art, and complex tools. In some caves, paintings of bison and horses suggest not just survival, but reflection, storytelling, and planning. The training ground wasn't only physical, it sculpted the mind. And here's the quirky tidbit. In ancient Sparta, young men were deliberately starved and forced to steal food, but punished if caught. The lesson wasn't about eating. It was about cunning, stealth, and resilience. An oddly human way of imitating the cosmic training protocol. You chuckle softly at the thought of the entire planet as one giant obstacle course. Volcanoes, fire drills, plagues, group projects in compassion, broken hearts, advanced coursework in emotional resilience. Somewhere the experimenters might be scribbling notes. Subject encountered disappointment. Response: ate 3 tubs of ice cream. Partial credit awarded. The path bends into a village scene. Children practice running, climbing, shouting in play. Adults weave, fish, and tell stories around fires. It hits you suddenly. Training isn't always grueling. Sometimes it's disguised as games, myths, or rituals. Maybe laughter itself is part of the resilience test, a buoyancy designed to keep subjects afloat when conditions darken. After all, if resilience were only grim endurance, humanity would have burned out long ago. But resilience wrapped in humor, now that's sustainable. Historians still argue about whether cultures developed rituals because of spiritual belief or because rituals bonded communities under stress. But in the test field lens, both purposes fit perfectly. Rituals are rehearsals, training the mind and body for the unexpected. A funeral teaches you to face loss. A harvest festival teaches you to share in abundance. Even a modern-day graduation ceremony feels like a checkpoint, marking progress through life's curriculum. As you keep walking, you notice your own scars, both physical and invisible. Each one is a memory of a trial survived. The bike fall that taught you balance, the betrayal that taught you boundaries, the failure that taught you persistence. Painful at the time, yes, but in hindsight, training. You're both the test subject and the trainee, shaping yourself in ways no classroom could. Another fringe theory drifts in. Some philosophers speculate Earth is less a prison and more a school, a proving ground where consciousness trains before moving on to something greater. Mainstream academia raises eyebrows at that notion, but it aligns seamlessly with the test field hypothesis. The hard edges of existence are the lessons. The resilience you build is the report card. You reach a hilltop, the view opening wide. Cities sparkle below, oceans glitter, mountains stand firm. You realize the training isn't just individual, it's collective. Humanity learns resilience as a species, bouncing back from wars, disasters, pandemics, collapses. Every trial leaves knowledge behind, even if it's only don't put all your grain in one basket. The experiment isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. And you can't resist a wry grin. If Earth is a training ground, then maybe gym memberships are just humanity subconsciously playing along, paying for extra lessons in resilience. Congratulations, you've unlocked advanced squats. Your supervisor approves. The absurdity makes you laugh out loud, and the sound feels like passing another checkpoint. The night deepens, stars spreading wide above, and you feel strangely reassured. Earth may not be gentle, but perhaps it was never meant to be. The point isn't ease, it's growth. And as you breathe deeply, letting the cool air fill your lungs, you sense the cosmic observer scribbling one last note for the night. Subject demonstrates awareness of training function. Response: humor, acceptance, forward momentum. Proceed to next trial. The hilltop air lingers cool around you, but your gaze drifts outward, past the mountains and oceans, beyond even Earth itself. A wild question surfaces. What if this isn't the only test field? What if our planet is just one lab station among countless others, scattered across the cosmos like Petri dishes on a vast bench? Suddenly you see Earth as part of a grander curriculum, its trials echoed or contrasted elsewhere. Mars, icy moons, far-off exoplanets shimmering with possibility. You imagine Mars first, its rusty plains and whisper-thin atmosphere. To mainstream science, it's a barren desert with tantalizing hints of past water. But to the test field imagination, Mars looks like an abandoned lab, an earlier experiment that either failed or finished. Maybe the supervisors tried resilience training there, but the subjects didn't adapt. Or maybe Mars is still running a long-term control trial. Empty chamber. Monitor baseline variables. Compare against Earth's chaos. Historians still argue whether humans' obsession with colonizing Mars is practical survival planning or just romantic curiosity. In the test field lens, it's hilarious. Lab rats eyeing the neighboring cage, plotting an escape. Then there's the quirky tidbit. In the 19th century, astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli described canali on Mars, natural channels but mistranslated into English as canals. For decades, people believed intelligent Martians had built waterways across the planet. It was later disproved, but imagine the experimenters' delight. Subjects invent entire alien civilization based on mistranslation. Creativity noted. Confidence unjustified. You keep walking, and your thoughts leap to icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, where oceans churn beneath frozen crusts. If Earth is a test field, those worlds could be alternate labs, sealed for now but primed for trials later. What lessons might come from a field with no sunlight, only geothermal vents and endless water? Humanity's probes scratch the surface, but in your imagination, the observers already know. Those moons are next semester's experiments. Historians still argue whether exoplanets discovered in the Goldilocks zone are habitable or whether life is too fragile to replicate. From the test field angle, that debate misses the point. The sheer number of candidates, thousands of exoplanets cataloged, looks like a vast inventory of test chambers. Some empty, some thriving, some failed. Maybe Earth isn't special. It's just one data point in a sprawling interstellar spreadsheet. You pause, chuckling at the absurd image of cosmic interns balancing clipboards, noting progress in Lab Earth while rolling their eyes at Lab Gliese 581G for refusing to produce anything but slime molds. You imagine whispered conversations. Which field are you assigned to? Earth. Oh, the messy one with sarcasm. Good luck. Then the fringe detail enters. Simulation theorists suggest our entire reality might not be planetary at all, but digital, a nested lab inside a greater computational system. In that view, other test fields wouldn't even need physical planets. They could be parallel simulations, running countless variations, worlds with different physics, different histories, different outcomes. Mainstream scientists debate the plausibility. But if Earth feels test-like already, the idea fits unsettlingly well. The path stretches into starlight, galaxies arching above you like luminous test tubes. You wonder what the other fields might be testing: patience, empathy, creativity. Maybe one world is designed for endless abundance to see if generosity thrives when nothing is scarce. Another could be pure hardship, measuring resilience in the harshest extremes. Earth, with its balance of beauty and suffering, might just be the middle trial, the baseline. And then you smirk at the comic angle. If Earth is middle school in the cosmic curriculum, maybe Mars was elementary and some advanced exoplanet is graduate school. You picture humanity as the awkward teenager of the universe, loud, emotional, and constantly inventing things it doesn't fully understand. Somewhere, an observer scribbles. Subjects exhibit adolescent energy. Recommend patience. Possible growth spurts incoming. The stars glitter more warmly now, less distant and more like neighbors. If there are other test fields, maybe they're not unreachable. Maybe one day, humanity graduates from this chamber and steps into another, carrying the resilience earned here. Whether that's Mars, an icy moon, or a simulation within a simulation, the thought is oddly comforting. You're not trapped, you're training, preparing for whatever comes next. As the night wraps around you, the galaxies hum like a lullaby, and you walk on, smiling at the possibility that Earth is just one experiment in an infinite laboratory. And maybe, just maybe, the observers aren't looking for pass or fail. They're watching to see how far you'll go when the next field opens its doors. You walk on beneath that galaxy-laced sky, and the ground beneath you starts to feel like quicksand made of whispers. The world hums with speculation, the kind of theories that hover on the edges of science, the fringe whispers that won't quite fade, no matter how many times they're dismissed. If Earth is a test field, then perhaps these strange ideas are leaks in the lab wall, clues slipping through for the curious ones who lean too close. You pause under a streetlight that flickers like a faulty bulb, and the whispers grow clearer. One of the loudest fringe ideas, simulation theory, the notion that everything you touch, the ground, your coffee mug, even your cat glaring judgmentally from the couch, might be rendered on the fly by an incomprehensible processor. Mainstream scientists have toyed with it seriously, even publishing papers, while others laugh it off as philosophical sci-fi. Historians still argue whether this obsession is just a modern echo of older beliefs, Plato's cave, Hindu Maya, biblical illusions, or whether it's humanity finally stumbling onto the truth. A mainstream historical fact that fits neatly here. In the 17th century, philosopher René Descartes famously wondered if an evil demon might be deceiving him into believing the world was real. He didn't call it a simulation, but the flavor was the same: suspicion that experience might be manufactured. It's eerie how humans have been circling this question for centuries, like moths to a glitchy flame. Then the quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, physicist John Archibald Wheeler suggested reality could be fundamentally digital, made of yes-no choices at the smallest scale. He called it from bit. Imagine the experimenters laughing. Subjects finally suspect binary structure. Outcome: endless video games. Mission partially successful. The streetlight buzzes out, and now you're in darkness, guided only by the murmurs of other fringe whispers. Some claim governments already know about the experiment, hiding evidence of surveillance. UFOs tucked away, secret monitoring tech humming in hidden bunkers. Conspiracy theorists might be dramatic, but if Earth is a test field, their paranoia isn't entirely wrong. Maybe the leaks they sense are real. Unexplained files, blurred photographs, officials who stumble over denials. Historians still argue whether conspiracy thinking is a flaw in human cognition or a survival mechanism, an instinct to find hidden patterns as protection. In the test field lens, conspiracy theorists might be the canaries in the coal mine, twitchy and overreacting, but occasionally correct. Maybe the experimenters sprinkle breadcrumbs just to see who notices, even if those breadcrumbs lead nowhere. You pass a billboard in your imagination, blank except for faint static. For a moment, you're sure you see words, test in progress, do not disturb subjects. Then it flickers away. Was it real, or just your brain chasing shadows? That uncertainty is the fringe itself, the zone between provable science and sheer fantasy, where curiosity either thrives or collapses into absurdity. A fringe detail with a smile. Some people claim déjà vu proves the universe occasionally reloads itself, like a video game checkpoint glitching. Mainstream neuroscience points to memory quirks, but the image is irresistible. Reload last save point. Subject confused but amused. Continue test. You chuckle softly, imagining supervisors tapping Ctrl+Z whenever you make a poor life choice. And here, where the whispers take their sharpest turn. If these theories are leaks, then maybe the point isn't to prove them, but to see how humans respond. Do you dismiss fringe thinkers as eccentrics, Or do you entertain the possibility that reality is stranger than textbooks? The observers might be running a meta-test, not what you believe, but how flexible your mind remains. The path glows faintly now, lit not by lamps but by phosphorescent questions rising like fireflies. Each one is a whisper. What if time loops? What if aliens planted us? What if consciousness is the experiment, not the body? You reach out, touch one, and it fizzles away, leaving only warmth in your palm. The questions themselves might be the enrichment puzzles of the lab, keeping your species inventive, restless, unwilling to settle into dull certainty. You smile, half weary, half thrilled, realizing that even if the whispers never yield hard answers, they keep the experiment alive with imagination. And maybe that's the secret purpose. Fringe science as a reminder that the test is bigger than you think. The fireflies of fringe whispers fade into the night, and you find yourself walking slower now, the weight of the big question settling heavy on your shoulders. If Earth really is a test field, then what about the ethics of it all? You glance at the stars and wonder, what kind of intelligence would dare to run experiments on beings who can feel joy, fear, love, and heartbreak? Is the data worth the suffering? And if you're the subject, do you even get a say? The path beneath your feet turns into polished marble as though you've stepped into a cosmic courtroom. Torches flicker along the walls, casting shadows shaped like scales and gavels. It feels ceremonial, as though the question of ethics has been waiting for you here all along. You pause, almost expecting a booming voice to demand objection. But instead, the silence invites you to weigh it yourself. A mainstream historical fact emerges. In the mid-20th century, the Nuremberg Code was created in response to horrific human experiments during World War II. It laid down principles of ethical research, informed consent, minimization of suffering, respect for participants. Historians still argue whether these principles have been consistently upheld even in modern times, but the lesson is clear. Playing with lives without permission is deeply troubling. If Earth is a lab, then by human standards, the whole thing is a colossal ethics violation. Then the quirky tidbit. In the 18th century, French physiologist René Réaumur studied digestion by asking a soldier with a permanent stomach wound to carry food samples inside his body. He'd retrieve the chewed-up morsels and examine how they dissolved. Imagine the cosmic lab notes. Subjects willing to swallow questionable methods. Informed consent unclear. Outcome, slightly gross but useful. You laugh under your breath, because somehow even the strangest human experiments pale compared to the possibility of the entire planet being one. You keep walking, and your mind spins with possibilities. If advanced intelligences are behind this, maybe they see ethics differently. To them, pain might not register as cruelty but as necessary input, like stretching a rubber band to test its strength. Or maybe they've convinced themselves that the subjects will eventually graduate, and that redemption justifies the hardship. Historians still argue whether suffering is ever ethically defensible, whether it strengthens or simply scars. The debate never settles, and maybe it's not meant to. You glance around the marble chamber and the torches flicker with faces, smiling children, grieving parents, explorers, warriors, lovers. They're all part of the same dataset, but they're also people, each carrying their own tiny universe of feelings. And that's where the ethical ache sets in. You whisper, we're not just rats in a maze. We dream, we hope, we love. If the experimenters are listening, you hope they feel the sting of that reminder. And yet, a fringe detail softens the thought. Some philosophers suggest the observers might be us in the future, looping back to test our earlier selves. If that's true, then maybe the ethics aren't a violation but a sacrifice. We're testing ourselves, suffering now to prepare later generations. Mainstream science doesn't endorse time loop ethics, but it offers a strange comfort. If you are the lab rat, maybe you're also the lab tech. You smirk at the comic angle because if ethics are flexible at that level, you can picture future you apologizing across time. Sorry about the heartbreaks, the pandemics, the stubbed toes. We really needed the data. But hey, you handled it with style. Not exactly reassuring, but it beats silence. The marble hall stretches on, and you realize there might never be a clean answer. Ethics in a cosmic experiment may not resemble human rules at all. But still, the very fact you're asking the question, that humanity feels the weight of fairness and consent, might be part of the test. Maybe the observers want to see if subjects grow into beings who demand ethics from the universe itself. The torches dim, the shadows recede, and you walk out lighter, not because the question is solved, but because you dared to carry it. And somewhere, maybe in a cosmic notebook, a line appears. Subject reflects on ethics, displays humor, empathy, and defiance. Critical milestone achieved. The marble courtroom dissolves behind you, and the path ahead brightens with a faint golden glow. It feels like the air itself is warming, humming, as if hinting at something more hopeful, progress. If Earth is a test field, then surely the experiment isn't just about pain, collapse, and confusion. Somewhere in the chaos, there must be signs that humanity is actually moving forward, passing benchmarks that suggest growth instead of stagnation. You walk through a field of markers, strange stone pillars inscribed with moments of achievement. On one, the discovery of fire crackles faintly. On another, the wheel turns in endless rhythm. A third hums with electricity, while another pulses with the quiet beat of a human heart transplanted successfully into another body. These are checkpoints, not random flukes, hints that maybe the experiment is working. A mainstream historical fact anchors your thoughts. In 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. For the first time in history, nations collectively agreed on basic standards of dignity and freedom for all people. Historians still argue whether it has been upheld consistently or remains more symbolic than practical. But from the test field perspective, it's a huge milestone, subjects demonstrating awareness of fairness and justice without needing divine thunderbolts to enforce it. Then a quirky tidbit. In 1969, humans planted a flag on the moon, but they also left behind a small plaque reading, "We came in peace for all mankind." Imagine the experimenters raising an eyebrow. Subjects finally leave home, immediately claim territory, but also attempt diplomacy. Mixed signals noted. As you keep moving, the field of markers glows brighter. Progress isn't always smooth or linear, but it's undeniable. Medicine has turned once deadly diseases into footnotes. Technology has connected people across oceans. Social movements have expanded rights to groups once ignored. Historians still argue whether these gains outweigh the persistent problems: war, inequality, environmental collapse. But in the test field model, maybe progress isn't about utopia. It's about whether subjects keep pushing, refusing to accept failure as final. You pause at a marker glowing faintly with laughter, because progress isn't just technological or political, it's cultural too. Humans invented comedy, music, dance, ways of turning suffering into art. If the observers are collecting data, surely they've noticed how you refuse to be reduced to numbers. Instead, you keep scribbling beauty into the margins of the experiment. The fringe detail floats in. Some futurists claim humanity may be approaching a singularity, a point where technological progress becomes so rapid that the experiment flips into something entirely new. Artificial intelligence, genetic editing, space colonization. It's all moving so quickly that mainstream scholars can't decide whether it's salvation or catastrophe. From the test field perspective, it looks like the climax of a long-running study. The final exam, perhaps. You grin at the irony. If Earth is a lab, then maybe the real test is whether you notice the test at all. Maybe recognizing the patterns, progress, failure, repeat, is itself the breakthrough. Like a student realizing the questions were teaching tools, not punishments. And here you are, walking through a glowing field of evidence, feeling a little smug for piecing it together. You stop at a marker etched with simple words, kindness. The stone radiates warmth, more than fire or machines ever could. Maybe progress isn't measured by inventions or declarations at all, but by how much compassion subjects show one another under pressure. If that's true, then the test is subtler than you imagined, and far more beautiful. The glow intensifies, wrapping around you in soft light. It doesn't erase the struggles, the collapses, the endless stubbing of toes, but it reminds you that humanity has always kept inching forward, even when dragged down by weight. You smile, whispering into the night, maybe we're not failing after all. And somewhere in the hidden cosmic notebook, a line is scribbled. Subject identifies progress markers, displays humor, humility, and cautious hope. Experiment continues. The golden glow of progress dims into twilight again, and a hush falls across the path. The air feels heavier, as though even the experiment itself wants you to slow down, to consider what comes next. If Earth is a test field, then surely there must be end conditions. No experiment runs forever, not even one this elaborate. The question hangs like mist. How does it end? You step into a wide plain where faint outlines of possible futures shimmer like mirages. On one horizon, you see towers collapsing, oceans swelling, forests burning. A shutdown scenario where the test ends not with graduation, but with a failed run. On another, you glimpse something gentler. Cities humming with renewable light, humans stepping calmly into space, laughter spilling into starlight. Graduation. Two possibilities, side by side, waiting for results. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. In the 20th century, scientists developed the doomsday clock, a symbolic gauge of humanity's proximity to self-destruction, first set in 1947 at 7 minutes to midnight. Adjusted over decades for wars, disarmament, climate change, and technology, the clock remains a haunting reminder that the experiment has visible end conditions. Historians still argue whether the clock is an effective warning or just fear-mongering symbolism. In test field terms, it looks like humanity sensing the countdown built into the chamber. Then comes a quirky tidbit. Some medieval apocalyptic sects believed the world would end in the year 1000, causing panic stockpiling, pilgrimages, and general dread. When the year passed uneventfully, they had to revise their predictions awkwardly. Imagine the experimenters taking notes. Subjects predict shutdown early. Response: collective panic. Outcome: calendar error. Amusing. You walk slowly across the plain, considering other scenarios. Endings don't have to mean failure. They can mean transition. Maybe the experiment ends when humanity achieves a threshold of empathy or cooperation, like solving a hidden equation. Or maybe it ends when subjects spread to other fields, Mars, exoplanets, digital realms, making Earth's lab redundant. Historians still argue whether civilizations collapse into oblivion or transform into something new. Perhaps both, depending on the test's design. Another possibility flickers in your mind. The shutdown could be external. A comet, a gamma ray burst, a cosmic event outside human control. If Earth is a lab, such catastrophes might be pre-programmed fail-safes, ensuring the experiment doesn't run longer than intended. Chilling, yes, but oddly efficient. Terminate trial when subjects reach threshold X-store data. Reset conditions. And yet the fringe detail gives you pause. Some theorists argue humanity might one day detect the experiment's framework itself. Glitches in physics, anomalies in constants. If that happens, the observers might simply switch off the simulation, like closing a laptop lid. Mainstream science doesn't endorse the idea, but the image is unsettling. You, mid-step, vanishing as the test file saves and shuts down. You laugh softly because even in contemplating endings, you can't resist humor. "At least let me save my snacks before you pull the plug," you mutter into the twilight. Maybe that's the real measure, whether subjects can face annihilation with a smirk. The mirages shift, and you sense that perhaps the experiment doesn't need a dramatic finale at all. Maybe it ends so gradually that you don't notice. Slow progress until the test simply becomes irrelevant, like a student who outgrows homework. Maybe one day, humanity looks around and realizes it has already graduated. The observers close their notebooks quietly, proud, and step back. The plane grows quiet, your steps soft in the grass. Whether the end comes as a bang, a whimper, or a gentle fade, you realize you won't be here to see the ultimate result. And somehow that thought comforts you. The experiment isn't about your survival alone, it's about humanity's persistence across ages. You exhale, whispering into the dim horizon, "Whatever the ending, I hope the data was worth it." And somewhere, maybe a line is scribbled. Subject acknowledges end conditions. Response, humor and calm acceptance. Experiment nears completion. The twilight plain softens until it feels like you're walking on the very edge of the field, the boundary of Earth's long-running trial. The air carries a quiet hum, like a machine winding down or maybe winding up to something new. If all of this has been a test field, then what happens beyond? You pause, the question lingering heavy but sweet. What if Earth was only phase 1? Ahead of you, a threshold glows faintly. Not a door, not a gate, but a shimmer in the fabric of the sky. You imagine stepping through it and suddenly seeing Earth as small and complete, like a terrarium you once lived inside. Every cycle, every disaster, every laugh and stubbed toe logged and finished. Maybe the experiment was never about survival here. It was about preparing you to leap into something larger, something stranger. A mainstream historical fact steadies the thought. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first human to orbit Earth, looking back at the planet from the cold of space. He called it beautiful, fragile, a blue sphere against black infinity. Historians still argue whether space exploration is humanity's destiny or an expensive distraction. But from the test field angle, Gagarin's flight looks like the first crack in the lab wall, a glimpse beyond phase 1. Then a quirky tidbit. Some astronauts report the overview effect, a profound sense of unity and perspective when seeing Earth from above. One even joked that from orbit you can't see any borders, only clouds, oceans, and the faint glow of cities. Imagine the experimenters jotting notes. Subjects finally notice shared habitat. Response, awe, mild guilt, increased poetry output. You step closer to the shimmering threshold and your thoughts swirl. What if phase 2 isn't physical space at all? Maybe it's a leap in consciousness, collective awareness, empathy so vast it redefines reality. Or maybe it's digital transcendence, humanity uploading into simulations so refined they blur with divinity. Historians still argue whether evolution has a direction or whether it's blind. In the test field story, direction seems baked in. Resilience first, then expansion, then something unimaginable. Fringe ideas whisper that phase 2 might already be happening, that moments of déjà vu, strange dreams, and global synchronicities are side effects of the field loosening, the training wheels about to come off. Mainstream voices call that wishful thinking, but you can't help smiling at the thought that maybe graduation is closer than you think. The shimmer brightens and you laugh softly because of course your humor follows you even here. "Well," you murmur, "if this was just the test, I hope phase 2 comes with better snacks and fewer Mondays." And maybe somewhere a cosmic supervisor leans back and chuckles, scribbling. Subject completes phase 1. Response, humor intact, eligible for advancement. You breathe deep, filling your lungs with the last air of the test field. Every struggle, every myth, every invention and heartbreak has brought you here to the edge of the experiment. Whether the leap leads to stars, to new dimensions, or to something beyond comprehension, you feel strangely ready. The test wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, curiosity, and the ability to laugh in the dark. The shimmer opens wider and you step toward it. Earth recedes gently behind you, no longer a prison, not even a puzzle, but a training ground you've outgrown. Ahead lies phase 2, whatever it may be, and you feel calm, steady, even sleepy. After all, the experiment doesn't need your fear. It just needs your willingness to walk forward, one step at a time, into the next great unknown. The shimmer of that imagined threshold softens into nothing more than darkness, calm and quiet. Your footsteps slow, your breathing deepens, and the grand experiment fades into the background like the hum of a faraway machine. There's no need to hold on to the questions tonight. Not about test fields or cycles or what lies beyond. For now, all that matters is the stillness wrapping around you like a warm blanket. Picture yourself lying back beneath a vast sky, the stars no longer sharp or suspicious, but gentle pinpricks of comfort. The grass cradles your body, cool and steady, and every sound, the faint rustle of leaves, the whisper of distant water, becomes a lullaby. Even your thoughts slow, stretching into long, soft threads that drift easily out of reach. The weight of history, of suffering, of mysteries unsolved, all of it slides off your shoulders. What remains is simple: the rhythm of your breath, the steady beat of your heart, the quiet certainty that you've made it through another day. Whatever experiments may or may not surround you, this moment belongs only to rest. So close your eyes now. Let the darkness become velvet around you. Imagine the unseen observers dimming the lights, lowering the volume, granting you the rare gift of quiet. You don't need to solve anything, prove anything, or prepare for phase 2 just yet. Tonight, the test pauses. Tonight, you rest. Drift gently into sleep.